They thought that a defenseless girl was in front of them, but soon regretted their mistake. Subscribe to not miss the new video. Write in the comments where you're watching from. The city lay under a thick shroud of night, its industrial district humming with the faint remnants of life. The scent of gasoline and asphalt mingled with the damp air, the distant echo of revving engines breaking the silence. Neon lights flickered above shuttered warehouses and empty streets, casting elongated shadows against the cracked pavement. A place where few ventured unless they had business to attend to, or trouble to find. A lone figure moved through the deserted streets, her footsteps barely audible against the hard ground. She walked with a measured pace, neither hurried nor sluggish, exuding an air of quiet confidence. The woman was tall, her frame lean but powerful, her movements fluid, efficient, and controlled. Dressed in a dark jacket, tactical pants, and sturdy boots, she blended into the city's muted colors, another shadow in the night. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a tight ponytail, revealing a face devoid of expression, neither tense nor relaxed, just still. She had the presence of someone who belonged, yet did not linger. Someone who observed everything and revealed nothing. Her name was unknown to those who did not need to know it. To the world, she was just another nameless drifter, a woman who never stayed long in one place. But to those who worked in the shadows, she had a reputation. Some whispered her name in fear, others in admiration, but all understood one truth: she was not someone to cross. A former operative, trained in the art of war, she had walked away from the military's chains, but not from its discipline. She had spent years honing her craft, refining every movement into instinct, every reaction into muscle memory. Combat was not a challenge for her, it was a language, one she spoke fluently. The city's night was quiet, save for the occasional hum of a passing vehicle or the distant bark of a stray dog. Most respectable people had long retreated into their homes, leaving the streets to those who thrived in the dark. She did not flinch at the sound of footsteps trailing her from a nearby alley, nor did she turn when a shadow moved from one doorway to another. These were things she noticed without needing to react. Awareness was a constant state for her, one that required no effort. Ahead, the street opened into a wider lot, a space where broken streetlights flickered above a row of garage complexes. The ground was stained with oil, the faint scent of burnt rubber lingering in the air. A group of men stood gathered around a cluster of motorcycles, their voices carrying through the night. 7 of them, dressed in leather jackets bearing the emblem of a snarling wolf. They spoke in deep, confident tones, laughing as they passed a bottle between them. Their presence dominated the space. They were at home here, kings of their small kingdom. She noticed them before they noticed her. It was impossible not to. Their laughter was loud, their postures relaxed but imposing. Men who were accustomed to being feared. She had encountered their kind before in every corner of the world. Men who mistook brute force for power, who believed strength was measured by the weight of their fists and the fear in others' eyes. She knew their type as intimately as she knew the weapons she carried, and she knew how easily that confidence could be broken. One of them caught sight of her first. A man with long hair tied back in a loose ponytail, his dark eyes narrowing as he nudged the man beside him. Their conversation paused as heads turned, following his gaze. The air shifted slightly, a ripple of interest passing through the group. She did not break stride, did not acknowledge them beyond a passing glance, but that was enough. The long-haired one grinned, stepping forward slightly, his body language casual but deliberate. Well, well, what do we have here?" His voice was coated with amusement, as if the night had just become more interesting. She did not stop. She did not quicken her pace either. She simply continued walking, her eyes locked on the path ahead. Ignoring them was not an act of defiance, but an assessment. How far would they push? Would they take her silence as disinterest or a challenge? The answer was already forming in their minds, even if they did not know it yet. Another one, stockier with a scar tracing down his cheek, took a step into her path. "Hey, sweetheart, you lost?" The laughter from the others punctuated his words, a chorus of unspoken intentions. Still, she did not respond. She shifted slightly, adjusting her course to step around him, her movements neither hesitant nor rushed. But the moment she did, another body blocked her escape. A wall of leather and muscle, the scent of sweat and alcohol clinging to him. "Where are you going in such a hurry?" The question was more of a statement, a warning laced with amusement. She stopped. Not because they had forced her to, but because she had seen enough. Her eyes flicked briefly across their positions, their stances, the weapons they carried. Chains, a bat, at least 2 knives tucked into belts. 7 against 1. The odds would have seemed impossible to anyone else. To her, they were irrelevant. She set her bag down beside her, a subtle movement, but one that did not go unnoticed. The shift in the air was immediate. They exchanged glances, amusement replaced by something else. They thought she was surrendering. A mistake. The man in front of her, the one who had spoken first, reached for her shoulder, his fingers barely brushing the fabric of her jacket. It was the last mistake he would make that night. The laughter that had filled the air moments before faded into something quieter, something sharper. A tension settled between them, unspoken but tangible. They were no longer playing, though they did not yet realize it. The woman in front of them had not reacted the way they expected. No nervous glances, no quickening breath, no shrinking away. She stood still, her gaze level, her body relaxed in a way that was almost unsettling. It was not the reaction of prey. The man who had reached for her hesitated, his fingers still lingering in the air where her shoulder had been only a second before. His confidence had not vanished, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes, something unsure. The others shifted around him, watching, waiting. This was the moment that would decide the nature of the encounter. A new voice cut through the silence. "Something wrong, Riggs?" It came from behind the group, deeper and steadier than the rest. A presence that carried weight. The voice of a man accustomed to giving orders, to being obeyed. The others parted slightly as he stepped forward. He was taller than the rest, broader, with a thick frame that carried the unmistakable presence of a man who had spent years establishing himself through force. A scar ran down the right side of his face, stretching from his temple to his jaw, twisting slightly when he smirked. The leader. He looked at her as if he were assessing a new opponent in the ring, his eyes scanning her from head to toe, measuring, weighing. But she could see it in the way he stood, the way he held himself. He was not just sizing her up. He was deciding what she was worth. "Well, well," he drawled, tilting his head slightly. "Not every day we get visitors in our little corner of the city." She said nothing. He let the silence stretch, his amusement growing when she did not flinch under his gaze. His men were watching now, waiting for the inevitable. They knew how this game played out. A stranger wandered into their domain, resisted just enough to make things interesting, then folded beneath the weight of numbers. It was a game they had played before. The leader stepped closer, closing the space between them. She did not move. "What's your name?" Still, she did not answer. The amusement in his eyes flickered just for a second. "Not much of a talker, huh?" He chuckled, glancing back at his men. "I like that. Gives a little mystery to the whole thing." He turned back to her, his smirk widening. "But I don't like rude guests. See, we like to know who's walking through our streets, especially at this time of night." He lifted a hand, slow and deliberate, as if daring her to stop him. She didn't. Not yet. His fingers brushed the collar of her jacket, a casual gesture, an assertion of dominance. And in that moment, she saw everything she needed to. He believed he had already won. It was in his posture, in the way his shoulders remained loose, in the confidence of his stance. He was not tense, not ready for a real fight. He had never considered that this encounter would be anything but another lesson to be taught. That was his mistake. She did not react immediately. Instead, she let the moment hang, let the others watch, let them settle further into their assumption of control. She had seen this pattern before, studied it in men like him. The type who ruled through fear, through intimidation, the type who never saw the fall coming. She exhaled, a quiet sound lost beneath the hum of the city. Then she moved. Not fast, not yet. Just a shift, a slight turn of her body. The kind of movement that should have been insignificant. But he felt it. His fingers had barely begun to tighten when her hand came up, wrapping around his wrist with a grip like steel. The change was immediate. The moment before had been a game, an exchange of words and glances. Now it was something else. The leader's smirk faltered just slightly, but it was there. A flicker of surprise, of confusion, of something he had not expected. Her grip tightened. His arm twisted at an angle it was not meant to move. A sharp sound cracked through the air. Not a break, not yet, but a warning. A threat carried not through words, but through the pressure against his bones. His men tensed. One of them took a half step forward, but the leader lifted his free hand slightly, a silent command to hold. He was still in control. He had to be. His smirk returned, but this time it was thinner, stretched tighter across his face. "Feisty," he muttered. She did not speak. She just twisted. It happened fast, too fast for him to react. One moment, his wrist was trapped in her grasp. The next, his entire arm was bent backward, his shoulder wrenched into a position it was never meant to reach. He grunted, the sound short and sharp, but he did not yell. Not yet. The others did not move. Not because they didn't want to, but because they were waiting, watching. This was not the moment they had expected, but they still believed it was temporary. They still believed he would take back control. He tried. He shifted his stance, bracing, preparing to pull free, but her grip did not loosen. If anything, it tightened. A simple step forward, a shift of her weight, and suddenly he was not standing anymore. The impact was harsh, his back slamming against the pavement with a dull thud. Dust rose around them, the scent of oil and asphalt filling the air. Silence. He blinked, staring up at the night sky. The others had stopped moving. She released his wrist. He did not move to rise, not yet. The world had shifted, just slightly, but enough. Enough that the laughter from before had vanished. Enough that the easy confidence had drained from the men surrounding them. She straightened, her expression unchanged, her breathing even. The leader exhaled sharply, staring up at her. Then he laughed. It was quiet at first, then deeper, rougher. Not amusement, not entirely. Something else. Something that was almost respect. She did not smile. She did not need to. The others were waiting. They had seen their leader fall, and now they were looking to him, waiting for the command that would dictate what happened next. Would he admit defeat, or would he demand blood? His gaze flickered to his men, then back to her. His hand flexed against the pavement. He made his choice. The laughter died as quickly as it had begun, swallowed by the thick silence that had settled over the lot. The men surrounding her were frozen in place, their bodies tense, shoulders squared. The fall of their leader had shifted the air between them, turning amusement into something sharper, something closer to shock. But disbelief alone wouldn't keep them still for long. They were waiting for him to give the signal, for the moment where balance would be restored. He was still on the ground, his chest rising and falling in steady breaths. His smirk had vanished, replaced by something colder. Not anger, not yet. More like calculation. He had made a mistake. He knew it. He had underestimated her. That much was obvious. What was not obvious, however, was how he planned to react. His fingers flexed against the pavement, testing, adjusting, measuring the damage. The others were waiting. Their patience would not last forever. Slowly, he exhaled and shifted his weight, pushing himself upright. He did not rush. Rushing would be an admission of weakness, and he would not give her that. His movements were deliberate, controlled, as if standing up on his own terms could erase what had just happened. But it could not. She saw it in the way his jaw tightened, in the way his eyes flickered with something close to resentment. He had expected to humiliate her, to put her in her place, and now the tables had turned. That did not sit well with a man like him. She had seen it before, in different cities, different countries. The moment when arrogance turned to something else, when a man realized he was not the strongest one in the room. Some took it as a lesson, others took it as a challenge. She had a feeling she knew which kind he was. He rolled his shoulders, cracking his neck, then met her gaze again. "All right," he muttered, his voice steady. "That was interesting." He turned his wrist slightly, flexing his fingers. His men were still watching, shifting uncomfortably in place. "I'll give you that," he continued. "Didn't see it coming. You're quicker than you look." It was not a compliment. It was an adjustment, a recalculation of the situation. He had expected her to fold, and now he was figuring out what to do with the reality in front of him. One of the others, a lanky man with a chain wrapped around his fist, took a step forward, his eyes narrowing. "You want us to handle this, boss?" The leader's lips curled slightly, but he didn't respond immediately. He was still watching her, measuring her again, searching for an answer that had already been given. She had not stepped back. She had not moved at all. There was no apology in her stance, no hesitation. The fact that she had just put him on the ground in front of his own men did not seem to weigh on her in the slightest. She did not gloat. She did not provoke. She simply stood there, waiting for him to decide. A test, one he failed. His smirk returned, but it was thin now, stretched too tight across his face. A man who had spent years in control did not easily surrender it. "Yeah," he muttered, nodding once. "I think it's time she learned where she is." The moment the words left his mouth, they moved. The man with the chain lunged first, swinging his arm in a wide arc, the metal links flashing under the streetlights. It was a clumsy attack, driven by aggression rather than precision. She sidestepped smoothly, pivoting on the ball of her foot, and let the chain sail past her, striking nothing but air. Before he could recover, she moved in. Her elbow snapped forward, catching him in the ribs. The breath rushed out of him in a sharp grunt, his body folding instinctively around the pain. She did not give him time to recover. A quick, efficient movement. Her fingers closed around the chain, yanking it free from his grasp. The moment his grip loosened, she twisted, reversing the weapon in her hands. One fluid strike. The metal links coiled around his wrist, the momentum of his own failed attack turning against him. She pulled hard. He stumbled, his balance thrown, and she used it against him, driving her knee into his solar plexus. He collapsed, gasping, the chain rattling against the pavement as it slipped from his fingers. Another one was already moving. A heavier man, broad shoulders, thick arms. He wielded a bat, raising it high above his head in an attempt to bring it down in a crushing blow. She did not wait for it to descend. She stepped into his space before he could swing, her hands moving with practiced ease. A swift strike to the wrist, precise and deliberate, and his fingers spasmed. The bat slipped from his grip. Her other hand shot up, catching it mid-fall. She turned it in her grasp and struck. The wood connected with his stomach, the force sending him staggering back, his breath leaving him in a harsh wheeze. He did not fall, but the fight had already drained from his eyes. He was realizing, just as the first had, that this was not the kind of battle he had expected. But there were more, and they were learning. Two at once this time, one with a knife, the other with nothing but his fists. The one with the blade thought he had the advantage. He was wrong. He lunged, and she moved with him, her body turning just enough to avoid the strike. She felt the rush of air as the steel passed by her ribs, close, but not close enough. Before he could pull back, she caught his wrist, twisting sharply. The knife clattered to the ground. She did not stop there. A second motion, fluid and precise, and she wrenched his arm at an unnatural angle. A sharp cry escaped him as he was pulled forward, off balance, his body following where his arm led. The man with the fist tried to take advantage of the distraction. A mistake. She released the first man, letting him crumple to his knees, and turned in time to catch the second's attack. His punch was powerful but wild. She let it slide past her shoulder, stepped into his guard, and delivered a single sharp blow to the side of his jaw. His head snapped back. He hit the ground before he even realized what had happened. The remaining men hesitated. The leader, who had been watching the entire time, exhaled slowly. He had expected her to fold. Instead, 4 of his men lay on the ground, and she had not even broken a sweat. For the first time that night, she saw it. Doubt. It flickered in his eyes, subtle but undeniable. This was not what he had planned. And now he had a choice to make. The leader had not moved, had not spoken, but the shift in the air was undeniable. 4 of his men were down, groaning or gasping, some barely conscious. The rest hesitated. They had not expected this. They had expected a lesson, a game played on their terms, the kind of power they understood, strength in numbers, intimidation, control. But now their world tilted, and they did not know how to react. She stood before them, silent, composed, her breathing steady. No aggression, no gloating, no unnecessary movement. Just presence. And that unsettled them more than anything else. A fight was supposed to be chaotic, filled with shouts and curses, threats and rage. But she had not spoken a word. She had not hesitated. She had not given them the reaction they needed to ground themselves, to believe they still had the upper hand. And now, for the first time, they realized they might not. The leader exhaled slowly, as if releasing the last remnants of amusement from his lungs. His face was blank now, the easy arrogance gone, replaced by calculation. This was no longer about proving a point. This was about control, and he could feel it slipping from his grasp. But men like him did not accept that. He rolled his shoulders, stretching his fingers as he stepped forward, his boots scraping against the pavement. The others straightened at the movement, their eyes flicking between him and the woman who had dismantled half of them in mere seconds. They were waiting for his command, for him to tell them that this was still their fight, that this was still their night. And he would. He had no other choice. The bat she had taken from one of his men lay on the ground beside her, forgotten. The chain, too. She did not need them. She had never needed them. "All right," he muttered, tilting his head slightly. "Enough." A single word, but the men heard it for what it was. A signal, a decision, and so they moved. One of them rushed first, desperate to reclaim the moment, to prove, to himself, to the others, to their leader, that this was still their fight. He swung wildly, his fists clenching as he aimed for her ribs, her throat, anything he could reach. But she had already seen the attack before it even began. It was in his stance, in the way his weight shifted forward, in the way his breath hitched just slightly before he lunged. She sidestepped cleanly, his momentum carrying him past her. Before he could recover, she struck, one precise blow to the back of his knee, sending him sprawling forward. He hit the ground hard, his hands scraping against the pavement. A sharp inhale, a curse, then silence as she stepped past him. Another followed, this one faster, smarter. He aimed low, trying to sweep her legs from under her. She jumped, barely a breath between her reaction and his attempt, her body twisting as she landed just behind him. Her arm shot out, catching him across the back of the neck. He staggered, gasping, his balance breaking. She pressed forward. A quick shift of her weight, a turn, and her elbow drove into his side. He crumpled. The others had stopped waiting. They attacked in pairs now, trying to overwhelm her, to pin her down, to take her speed away. It did not work. A knife flashed in the dark, a glint of metal catching the weak glow of the street lights. She saw the blade before it was even drawn, saw the way the man gripping it hesitated for just a fraction of a second before slashing forward. That hesitation cost him. She moved in, not away. One hand grabbed his wrist, twisting sharply. The knife clattered to the ground. A heartbeat later, she turned his own momentum against him, sending him crashing into the man beside him. The others staggered, but did not fall. He recovered faster than the rest. He was stronger, more trained. But it did not matter. He came at her, swinging, trying to grab her, to pin her arms. She let him get close. Then she struck. A quick, brutal knee to the ribs, a sharp blow to the sternum. His grip faltered. She stepped back just slightly, then twisted. One clean motion, a kick to the side of his head. He dropped. The fight should have ended there. It would have, if they had any sense left. But pride was louder than reason, and the leader was still standing. So they kept coming. The next few moments were a blur of movement, a rhythm she knew intimately. She flowed through them like water, shifting, striking, evading. Every attack they threw at her was countered before it could land. Every desperate swing turned against them. One by one, they fell. And then, finally, the lot was still. The only ones left standing were her and him. The leader did not move. His men lay sprawled around them, groaning, coughing, trying and failing to push themselves up. The bat was still where she had left it. The knife, too. She had not drawn a single weapon. She had not needed to. The leader exhaled through his nose. Then, at last, he spoke. "You should be dead." His voice was flat, not disbelief, not anger, just fact. She did not answer. He flexed his hands, glancing down at his men. A muscle twitched in his jaw, then he nodded. "All right," he muttered. A decision made. He lunged. The moment his body tensed, she knew. The weight shift, the tightening of his stance, the slight movement of his shoulder before his muscles fully committed. She had seen it all before. A telegraphed attack, not reckless but desperate. He had no choice now. His men were broken, scattered around them in a heap of groans and shallow breaths, their confidence shattered along with their bodies. He was the last one standing. If he did not fight, if he did not at least try to reclaim his dominance, then he had no control left, and men like him did not survive without control. He lunged, fists aimed for her ribs, his movements powerful but unrefined. He wanted to end this quickly, to overwhelm her, to make her fold beneath his sheer strength. But brute force was only effective against someone who didn't know how to break it. She shifted, weaving through his attack with practiced ease, stepping just outside his reach. His knuckles grazed the edge of her jacket, but it was not enough. She felt the wind of his momentum, but not the impact. He had expected resistance, the satisfying collision of bone against flesh, the feeling of dominance reestablished. But there was nothing. And that was worse. Before he could adjust, she moved. A quick strike to his ribs, precise and controlled, the kind that stole breath without causing panic. A warning, a reminder that she was still here, still calculating. He grunted but did not stop. His next attack came even faster, anger turning his strikes into something wilder. A left hook, a knee aimed for her stomach. She dodged both, stepping into his space rather than away from it, making his reach useless. The closer she was, the less time he had to adjust. His knee barely retracted before she capitalized. She caught his arm mid-swing, twisting at the elbow, forcing his body to follow the unnatural angle. His balance wavered, and that was all she needed. A sharp, downward pull, and suddenly he was no longer in control of his own footing. He stumbled. Not much, just a shift of weight, but for a man like him, it was everything. She drove her palm into his chest, using his own loss of balance against him. His feet dragged against the pavement as he staggered back, his breath coming faster now. He was starting to understand. Survival was no longer about dominance. It was about not losing completely. He exhaled sharply, rolling his shoulders, adjusting his stance. He was watching her differently now, not with arrogance, not even with the simmering anger he had shown before. He was thinking. He was realizing that this was not a fight he could win through brute force alone. Good. It would make this easier. His next attack was different. Less aggression, more calculation. He faked a swing to her right, only to pivot and aim lower, hoping to catch her mid-step. She blocked it easily, but the intent was clear. He was trying to slow her down, to wear her out. She let him try. He moved again, another feint, this time leading into a shoulder check. It connected, just barely, pushing her back a step. But it was not enough. She recovered instantly, her feet steady, her breathing unchanged. His wasn't. The weight of his previous fights, the exertion of commanding his men, the mounting frustration, it was all catching up to him. She could see it in the way his shoulders lifted just a little too much when he inhaled, in the slight delay between his movements, in the way sweat glistened at his temple. He knew it too. She did not give him time to think, a swift, decisive motion. She stepped into his guard, cutting off his space, her hands moving with brutal efficiency. An elbow to the jaw, a palm strike to the sternum. His head snapped back, his breath leaving him in a sharp exhale. He stumbled. This time he did not recover as quickly. His balance wavered for just a moment, but that was all she needed. Her next strike sent him to his knees. For the first time that night, he did not immediately try to get up. The lot was silent. She stood over him, her posture unchanged, her breathing slow and even. He knelt before her, one palm pressed to the pavement, the other resting against his ribs. His shoulders rose and fell with each breath, his jaw clenched, his gaze fixed downward. He had lost. There was no denying it now. His men had lost before him, but their defeat had been gradual, a series of miscalculations and failures. His was final. She watched him, waiting. Would he make the smarter choice, or would he force her hand again? The leader exhaled sharply through his nose, shaking his head just slightly. Then he laughed. It was not the same laugh from before. Not the arrogant, careless amusement he had displayed when they had first crossed paths. This one was lower, rougher. A man coming to terms with a truth he did not want to acknowledge. He looked up at her. "You're not just some girl lost in the wrong part of town, are you?" She said nothing. He huffed a breath, running a hand through his hair, wincing as his fingers brushed a sore spot. "You're something else," he muttered, almost to himself. She waited. The decision was his now. Would he take this loss and move on? Or would he do what men like him often did? Double down, call for vengeance, send more after her in the nights to come. For a long moment, he did not move. Then, finally, he pushed himself to his feet. His stance had changed. No longer the looming posture of a man who believed himself untouchable. Now he was simply standing. Not in defiance, not in challenge. Just standing. The others still groaned on the ground, but some were stirring, watching, waiting for him to give them some kind of order. He did not. Instead, he met her gaze once more. Then he nodded. A simple gesture, an acknowledgement. She had won. She did not return it. She turned, retrieving her bag from where she had left it. Behind her, the leader exhaled one last time. Then, softly, almost too low to hear, "You ever need a fight?" She didn't wait to hear the rest. She walked away, leaving him and his men to their silence. She walked without hurry, her pace measured, her breathing still steady despite the fight that had left half a dozen men groaning on the pavement. The weight of her bag settled against her shoulder, a familiar presence, a part of her as natural as the breath she took. She did not look back. She never did. Once the fight was over, it was over. There was no need to linger, no need to gloat. That was a luxury for those who needed to prove something. She never had. The night stretched around her, its silence deeper now, as if even the city itself had paused to absorb what had just happened. The neon lights flickered above the garage complex, casting long, jagged shadows across the sprawled bodies of the men she had left behind. They were not unconscious, most of them at least. Some were trying to sit up, holding on to ribs that ached, jaws that had been struck with just the right amount of force to drop them, but not break them. Their leader stood among them, no longer the towering presence he had been when she first arrived. He had straightened his spine, but something had changed in the way he carried himself. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something harder to define. Not exactly fear, not exactly defeat, but an understanding. He had looked into something tonight that he had not expected. His men watched him, waiting, searching for a reaction that would tell them what came next. None of them spoke. The laughter, the casual threats, the sneering confidence, it had all vanished. The night had given them something they were not prepared for. A lesson, whether they accepted it or not. She did not need to stay to know what would happen next. Some of them would pretend it had never happened, dismissing it as a bad night, a lucky break. Others would nurse their bruises and wonder, for the first time in a long time, what it meant to be truly powerless. And the leader, he would carry this memory longer than any of them. She reached the edge of the lot, the pavement stretching ahead of her into the darker parts of the industrial district. She could hear faint noises in the distance, the occasional car rolling down a nearby street, the distant hum of a train on the tracks. The world continued as it always had. And then, finally, she heard it. A shift behind her. A voice, low but clear. "You're just gonna walk away?" Not a challenge, not even disbelief. Just a question. She stopped. A moment passed, stretched thin by the weight of the night. Then, slowly, she turned her head, just enough to glance over her shoulder. The leader stood a few paces away, his posture no longer aggressive, no longer seeking to impose himself. His lip was split, blood drawn at the corner of his mouth. A bruise had already begun to form along his cheekbone. He was still standing, but the fight had drained out of him. His men were still watching. She met his gaze. There was no hostility in it now, no challenge, no demand for another round. If anything, there was something else, something heavier. He wasn't used to losing. He wasn't used to being the one left on the ground while someone else walked away. But he had also seen what she was, what she could do. And that meant something. "You could have done worse," he muttered, wiping the blood from his lip. "To me, to them." She didn't answer. He exhaled, shaking his head slightly. A dry chuckle left him, low and rough. "Yeah, I get it." She held his gaze for a moment longer, then turned away again. As she stepped back into the night, she heard him speak one last time. "See you around." It wasn't a threat, it wasn't a promise, just an understanding. She didn't look back. She disappeared into the dark, the sound of his men stirring behind her, the only thing left of the fight that had come and gone. The city swallowed her steps, and soon the night carried on as if nothing had happened at all. The bar was dimly lit, the air thick with the scent of stale beer, cigarette smoke, and the faintest trace of old leather. The neon sign outside flickered intermittently, casting pale red light through the dust-streaked windows. Inside, the patrons spoke in low voices, the clinking of glasses and muffled laughter punctuating the steady hum of background music. It was the kind of place where no one asked questions, where people drank to forget, to kill time, to escape. In one of the darker corners, away from the bar, a group of men sat slumped in silence. Their bodies ached, bruises forming in dark blotches across skin that had known violence, but not like this. The night had been supposed to end differently. It was supposed to be like any other, filled with the familiar rhythm of intimidation, of easy victories, of dominance reinforced. Instead, it had ended with them on the ground. The leader sat at the center of it all, a fresh drink in front of him, untouched. His knuckles were still scraped raw, his ribs throbbing beneath the weight of his own breath. He could still feel the moment it had all shifted, the exact second when he had realized that everything he had known about fighting, about control, had been wrong. He rolled his shoulder, testing the ache that lingered from where he had hit the pavement. The others watched him, waiting. Not for orders, not for commands, just waiting to see what came next. No one spoke about her. They didn't need to. She was there in the silence, and the tension hanging over them, and the bruises they carried like reminders carved into their flesh. Her presence had not left with her. It sat with them, unseen but undeniable. One of them shifted uncomfortably, exhaling sharply as he pressed a hand to his ribs. "This is bullshit," he muttered. No one responded. The words weren't meant to be answered, just thrown into the void, spat out like venom that had nowhere else to go, but they all felt it. the lingering weight of something they did not quite know how to name. Anger? Maybe. Humiliation? Definitely. Fear? No, not fear. Something else. Something worse. A reminder. The leader exhaled slowly, leaning forward, elbows resting against the table. His fingers traced the rim of his glass, his expression unreadable. His men watched him carefully, waiting for him to say something, to give them something to hold on to, a reason, an excuse, a way to twist what had happened into something they could understand. But he had nothing to give them. Finally, one of them spoke. What now? It was a simple question, a necessary one. The leader considered it, his fingers tightening just slightly against the glass. What now? Did they track her down? Take another shot? Did they let it go? Bury the night in the past? Pretend it had never happened? The choices sat in front of him like a row of broken teeth. He could still feel the way she had looked at him, not with contempt, not with pity, but with something colder, indifference. She had not seen them as a threat, not then, not now. That should have made him angry. Instead, it just made him tired. He exhaled sharply, shaking his head. Nothing. The others tensed at the word, eyes snapping toward him, searching for meaning. Nothing? One of them echoed, voice tight, confused. That's it? He looked up at them then, gaze steady, unmoving. You think going after her again changes what happened? His voice was quiet but firm. You think that's going to put us back on top? The silence stretched between them, thick with something heavy, something dangerous. Then, finally, someone scoffed. Shit, the man muttered, dragging a hand down his face. I can't believe this. The leader just shook his head. He didn't care if they believed it or not. They would eventually. One by one, they would come to understand. The world was bigger than they had thought, and so was she. He lifted his drink and took a slow sip, letting the burn settle in his throat. No one spoke after that. There was nothing left to say. The night was still young, though the weight of it settled over the city like a heavy hand, pressing into the spaces between buildings, creeping into alleyways where the light did not reach. The hum of neon signs and the distant roar of engines filled the air, blending with the occasional bark of a strayed dog or the muffled voices of people who did not belong to this part of town. It was a world that never truly slept, only shifted, moving from one form of life to another as the hours stretched on. She walked through it without hurry, her pace steady, unbothered. The fight was behind her now, another encounter added to the long, quiet history written across her body in scars and muscle memory. She did not dwell on it. That was not how she functioned. A fight was a fight. Whether it had ended in seconds or dragged on through pain and exhaustion, it always ended the same way. And then she moved on. The cold air pressed against her skin as she crossed an empty street, stepping past the glow of a flickering street lamp. The bag at her side was light. She traveled that way, carrying only what she needed, discarding anything unnecessary. There was no room for excess in her life, no patience for clutter. She had spent years learning how to move without attachment, how to keep only what mattered. A few streets away, a bar door swung open, spilling laughter and music into the night before slamming shut again. She didn't turn toward it. There was nothing there for her. Her destination was already set. A small apartment, tucked away in a part of the city where people didn't ask questions. It was not home. She did not have one of those. But it was where she kept her things, where she allowed herself to rest when there was time for it. It was temporary. Everything was. She reached the building without issue, stepping into the dimly lit stairwell and making her way up the worn concrete steps. The door at the end of the hall was unmarked, indistinguishable from the others. She unlocked it with precise movements, stepping inside without hesitation. The space was sparse. A bed, a table, a chair, a small kitchen she barely used. There was a shelf against one wall, but it held no decorations, only books and a few neatly arranged knives, their blades reflecting the dull glow of the overhead light. A laptop sat closed on the table, waiting. She locked the door behind her, dropping her bag onto the chair before crossing the room. Her hands moved automatically, rolling her shoulders, stretching muscles that still held the ghost of the fight. There was a small mirror above the sink. She caught her reflection briefly. Hair slightly disheveled, a faint bruise forming along her jaw. She had taken worse. She turned away, pushing up the sleeve of her jacket to check the thin scratches on her forearm. Minor. Nothing that required attention. Then, finally, she moved to the table and flipped open the laptop. The screen glowed in the dim room, casting shadows across her face as she pulled up the message that had been waiting for her. A new job, a new target, a new reason to step back into the dark. She scanned the details quickly. Names, locations, instructions. It did not matter who they were, not really. Only that they were next. She closed the laptop and leaned back slightly, exhaling as she let the silence settle around her. Another night. Another fight waiting to happen. She would be ready. She always was. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Watch more videos to dive deeper into the action, and share this one with others who might like it too.